Hello, 5:40 a.m. Dawn Busters. I wanted to start at the bottom of the hour, but I got held up a little bit. Had to finish the coffee. So today is a well-known brand versus a not particularly well-known, and actually not even in production anymore brand. This Dawn Busters Taste Challenge. We have Jim Beam Bourbon, right? One of the top 100 selling brands of liquor in the world. I think it's one of the top 20. I have to check those stats, but it's one of the big ones. From Kentucky versus, and that was introduced, by the way, in 1937. There were other Beam family products, right? But they came out with Jim Beam Bourbon. And Jim Beam Choice, formerly known as Beam's Choice. My records show, or my research shows, that the trademark was given in 1957. I thought it was older, but I was only able to find that it was first used anywhere in 1957. Like December 1st or whatever it was. It doesn't matter. So, okay, it made it for 60 years and then it was discontinued. At one time, it was a very expensive. Well, it was a relatively higher expensive bourbon, and it was maybe expensive to produce because every Christmas season they would have all these specialty canters that you could buy as a collectible, special bottle design, Beam's Choice, famous artist series. They were reproductions, and they would make little funny ads about it. If you look at some of the old magazine ads, they say, "We admit these are reproductions." And then later they commissioned a current artist, like in the 60s and 70s, who did wildlife paintings to do the bottle label design. So, and they sold them as collectibles, saying if you're into collecting and bottles and whatnot, this could be a good thing to do. So, but I guess that died away maybe 30 years ago, and then it just became sort of a relegated to like the obscure shelf, right? And there was no more advertising for it. They just focused on their flagship. It used to be in two different proofs. I was looking on the old ads, like it was a 90 proof version and an 86 proof version. I think they were sold concurrently. And then we have the modern Jim Beam Choice. And that might have been when they changed the name to Jim Beam Choice when they went to 80 proof, the current standard. One unusual thing about it, you notice it's the green bottle. And when you get these green label whiskeys, usually they're charcoal filtered. You might see that, charcoal filtered. I noticed that was the same case with the Evan Williams. So, and I don't know who started that. Did that start with Jack Daniels? But their green label, you know, all their Jack Daniels whiskeys are charcoal mellowed, as they call it now, before they barrel age it. But you had the green label Jack Daniels, which they said was sort of like from the lower part of the warehouse in the middle where it's cooler and it doesn't get the proper heat. Whatever. But all the other ones I've seen so far, the Evan Williams and this one, and I think there's others, there are the charcoal filtered. So, but they do it. Well, I haven't researched Evan Williams yet, the green label, but the Beam, their attitude was they touted this in their advertisements, that they should filter it, charcoal filter it after aging. They said it was better than some other whiskeys made in Tennessee. Well, we know who they were throwing that at. I didn't see that they were that different. Honestly, they both tasted fine to me. All right, so let's see how this charcoal filtered Jim Beam Choice goes up against the regular Jim Beam, which is not apparently charcoal filtered. And somebody was telling me that he found out, and he didn't give any sources, but he was saying, well, after Suntory bought them, Okay, let's see here. Okay. Well, I kind of marked it wrong, but I'll remember. He said that after Beam Suntory was formed about 3 years ago, that the Suntory company didn't want to pay for this extra process. They had to have their own facility with the charcoal mellowing, aging, and they said nah. So they just killed it off because they wanted to cut costs and whatnot. I don't know what the story is. That may be true. Honestly, I wasn't able to find a whole lot about this at all, but I'm glad I found it. All right, both attractive labels in their own way. So let's see if anybody's, I see we got one viewer here at 5:46. As the sun rises, it's going to be a clear day, good day for waxing the car, mostly clear. Try to wax the Dodge Avenger every June. Being under a carport, it tends to, the wax tends to stay on it for about a year. Okay. I gotta mute those tabs. Okay, should be set up now. Make sure about this. Okay, there's the original and the choice. And they were saying it's an old recipe and their distillery master preferred it or whatever. Well, he might have preferred it back in 1957 and they started rolling it out as a brand, but it's a different recipe. They're both different. The Jim Beam today and this continued item, they're both different than the original recipe. Okay. But I don't have a time machine, can't go back and try it in 1957. Okay. And they're the same color, just straight gold oriented amber. So we'll mix them up. So as far as appearance, there's no difference. And as far as higher proof, there are higher proof Jim Beams out there. So I just think that the charcoal filtering was cut for all of them. All right, well mixed. Let's go with the aroma. Oh, and the price, it was the same price. This choice was $14.99, and usually around here, Beam is $14.99. I saw that Martin Wine Cellar has it on sale this week for $12.99 for that standard bottle. So you can look at those sales papers. You can get good beer, wine, and liquor prices around here, at least. This one has that kind of thing I've noticed over the year or so that I've been messing around with Jim Beam, that it's got that green wood that it's like wood that wasn't dried. It's green, it's freshly cut, and then some mossiness. Definitely has that standard, which to some people, they hate it. They hate that smell and that flavor, therefore they hate Jim Beam. But other people, that appeals to them, so it's a personal preference issue. Let's see here. Seems like the one on the right has more of that the moss and the green wood. It's like a little mintier little stronger perhaps, but they're both the same alcohol, 40% alcohol, 80 proof. So let's go with the taste. I don't know. My prediction is that they're going to be very similar. Another thing, the choice is age 5 years and the regular beam is age 4. So you have a year difference in the aging. But my prediction is they're not going to taste too different from each other. And I probably won't, there's a good chance I won't be able to tell them apart. That's my prediction. I don't know if it's going to happen. Yeah, you get that candy note. Sweet, sugary candy, like caramel and vanilla, back note, wood. I think that is a big appeal of that candy taste. People love sweet things, candy, whatever. Not as much of it. More wood, more char, perhaps, not necessarily, perhaps more moss. And I think they both have that dried flower thing. Yeah, dried flowers. Maybe char, some kind of charcoal, charcoal. They are almost they're very similar. Okay, so but then the price doesn't matter because they're about the same price, and the availability matters since you can't get the choice anymore. But you may find it on shelves for years, just left over on a store shelf, because they'll just exhaust their stock. Although one guy at the liquor store did tell me once the word gets out that it's being discode, the collectors are going to snap it up and hoard it and think maybe it'll go up in value. I don't know about all that, but that could be an issue. The locator tool is unreliable in this case because, like I said, it's being discoded. So they might tell you it's at a store, was at that store, but the stock was exhausted and it won't be renewed. Because I called different stores. We don't have that, never heard of it. And the store I bought this at, Red Dot Liquors, told me they didn't have it. And frankly, we're unfamiliar with it. Except one of the guys in there said he thought he had remembered seeing it. But yet, there it was on the shelf. There it was. I said, huh, they don't have it, but there it is. 2 bottles, just 2 bottles, kind of covered with dust. And I think they were from 2014. I believe that's what this bottle says. Let's see. Oh, the light is coming up, boy. I think, yep, 2014. So it had just been sitting there for 3 years. Which is probably why the locator tool was saying that it was no longer available, because probably the last time they had stocked it was in 2014 and they hadn't reordered it in the interim. So they just put it off the list of, the distributor took it off the list of available items. Okay. Couldn't get my napkin. All right. Yeah, I put the Dave's Insanity sauce on those grits, so yeah, it opened up the sinuses. All right, Busters, I'm gonna call it the right, maybe your left, because sometimes these things will be reversed. The right side, I think, is the choice. And the left side, I think, is the original Jim Beam. well, the so-called original, the original Jim Beam with a different recipe. Same thing with Jack Daniels. They'll say, oh, yeah, we've been making this here whiskey, folks, since 1866. And I'm thinking, no, you've been making a whiskey of various proofs, age, and recipe since 1866. Was not the same thing. Might be better now. I mean, the quality control back in the 1800s, from what I've read, was suspect. They had a lot of problems with fake whiskeys back then. You know, in other words, things that weren't what they said they were. I mean, we still have this thing in China where they make fake Budweiser, right? So, but a lot of that back in the even before Prohibition and maybe after, like with some brands, it was just like you bought the name. Say, I think with Wild Turkey, that was the case. Like, you could pay like a franchise fee. Like, say you owned a distillery in Philadelphia, you could pay a franchise fee, and then you could make it and sell it. And then it would be something like Wild Turkey, blah, blah, distillery, Philadelphia, Kentucky style whiskey or something like that. And they just figured people would notice, and maybe they didn't. It wasn't until later when it was bought out, I think, by Austin Nichols, they actually brought all the production to Kentucky. And it may have been the case with some other products, even Jack Daniels, that it was farmed out like beer is done. You know, beer brands are farmed out. You pay a license to make it, a licensing fee, and then you're making Budweiser for Canada, or you're making Kirin Ichiban for the United States. You're using their recipe under their, you know, supposedly their supervision. You know, they're making you think there's a guy from Kirin sitting up there watching everyday process. That's not happening. They send in people. Sometimes they check the quality. You know, Anheuser-Busch makes the Kirin Ichiban in the United States, and they check the quality, and oh yeah, it's fine. You know, oh, that's fine. Foster's, same thing, farmed out. Australian for beer, but it's made in Fort Worth, Texas. So, and it could be the case with liquor too, that you might want to check if it's Kentucky style and whatever being sold in Vietnam, but it could be made under license. Anyway, enough of that contemplative stuff. Although very interesting. Yeah, so I think this one is the regular original Jim Beam. Let's check. Yep. And this is the choice. All right. So there are subtle differences. Not profound, but subtle. And a lot of times I think when you're looking at these liquors, these spirits, there's little subtle differences in a usually within a price range, right? Like we looked at last night, your blended whiskeys, $8 to $10 price range, have little subtle differences. You get into your 13 to range like here, and so you know you have a little subtle difference. And then you get it and up the ladder. So the big problem would be where if you're drinking them and you're paying a significantly higher price for one versus the other, but you can't tell the difference. There's no discernible or appreciable difference in quality. That's where they would start to say, wait a minute now. You paid $15 for your bottle of bourbon, and I paid $68.95 for mine, and we can't tell them apart in a blind taste test. Because that's the key, the blind taste test, not this. I'm looking at the label, and I guarantee you mine's better. You got to apply it. Apply the taste test. Then let's see if you guarantee it. I did that with the Hefeweizens, the ale, a mass-produced one versus another mass-produced one, but from Germany, you know, a famous company of Weihenstephan. Okay, one is 2 to 3 times more expensive, but it wasn't any better if it was as good. And I've run across this with other beers. This one here is supposed to be, oh, it's so fantastic. It's $13 a 6-pack, and that stuff, you know, that's only $99 a 6-pack. You're crazy. There's such a vast difference. Then you do a blind taste test. Is there a difference? And if you're doing it and the difference is so minimal, you know, a minimal difference, minimal, but you're going to pay $7 more a 6-pack for it. That's, to me, not a very good trade-off. You know, so we used to be that, we talked about this before, there was a television show on PBS years ago in the 80s called Trade-Offs. And in this case, this is leisure, right? So making a trade-off in leisure is no big deal unless you're using necessary monies for leisure activities, which is where people run into trouble. They buy everything on credit with credit cards, and so you're basically borrowing money. Well, that's a very bad trade-off, because you're trading pleasure now for debt later, which is always a terrible trade-off. So if we look at these things within context of trying different beverages and evaluating them and all of that, you can have an enjoyment. Some people look at beer reviewing, wine reviewing, whiskey reviewing as though it's something actually important. They put it on the same level as like healthcare reform, say like the U.S. government looking at the so-called Obamacare. That in their mind, it's just as important. But I can't conceive that kind of thinking, you know, like that is not important. This, what we're doing right here is not, it may be fun, enjoyable. It's a leisure activity. It is not important. Okay. So you say, well, it's important to the distillery company. It's important to the distributor in the grocery store, the retailer. Yeah, it's important to them, but as a consumer, and you have no, as they say, horse in the race, you don't care. It's immaterial on my end because I'm just purchasing it. All right, so yeah, I think the Jim Beam choice is a little better. The charcoal filtering after barrel aging does make a difference. And the 1 extra year aging does make a difference. Is it significant or great difference? No, and I think that's one reason it was cut, because they're saying that we're spending all this money for this extra process, but what we're getting in the trade-off is marginal. So they cast it off. Okay. Any last comments? Well, any last comments? We didn't have any comments to start with. JC says hi. Hello, JC. Thanks. Thank you for watching this Dawn Busters. Oh, I believe we better get back into some brandy in these Dawn Busters coming up. We've got the Presidente brandy. I need, right. Yeah, need. Let's think about that word. Need to review it within a context. Yeah. The Safeway brandy, whatever that's, D.W. Anders, whatever that is that they have. I need to review that. And then we can apply taste challenges in that area. And perhaps, and probably, I would like to try the Sacred Bond brandy, bonded brandy, the world's first bottled and bond brandy from Heaven Hill, who was the company. Christian Brothers. Well, but it's okay. There's an example: contract distilled by Heaven Hill for the Christian Brothers Catholic Order. Okay, so in the final analysis here, it's an approach conflict. This is an approach conflict because either choice you make is a good choice. You're looking at the same price essentially, comparable flavors, although one is marginally better. But either way, they're enjoyable products. I don't get the whole thing about some people saying that Jim Beam is a horrible product and it tastes like airplane glue. I used to do models, you know, make models, build models with a little kit, and I smelled a lot of airplane glue. It didn't smell anything like this. I don't know what that's about. Okay, thank you for watching this video production, and maybe next week we'll do one of these, maybe two, maybe, we'll see. And look for that beer taste challenge also between the Hefeweizens. That you might find it interesting. And some people, they might find it laughable, whatever. But anyway, take care.